Welcome to WECAN, Lisa Bonos. You're a tech, culture, dating, and relationship reporter based in San Francisco, and you last worked for the Washington Post for the past 20 years and were laid off in the recent purge and are now freelancing. You're an experienced researcher, reporter, and writer, always creating buzzy and highly shareable stories that reach and engage with millions of readers across platforms. Lisa, tell us a little bit about those pivotal points that led you to where you are today.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Um, there are so many, there are so many points. Let's see. The first would probably be that when I was a college student at UCLA, I was working at the student newspaper. I was a copy editor, and I applied for a Washington Post copy editing internship. The first time I didn't get it. The second time I did, but I also had a friend and colleague at the newspaper who had the year that I didn't get it, she was a Washington Post intern, and she came back and told us all about it. And when I later did become a Washington Post intern and I couldn't get into my housing right away, I slept on her floor for a week, back when in our 20s. So I have always felt that there have been people one step ahead of me helping light the way with by example, and then
Mm.
also helping bring me along. That's just one person. There've been many.
Lisa, so you spent 20 years at the Washington Post. Talk to us about the different things that you wrote about and how you sort of, went through the ranks and where you ended up and where you're now.
Yes, I'm still taking stock of all of
Mm.
it. I started on the copy desk. I was the copy editor, so
Mhm.
writing headlines, editing in real time, a lot of back and forth with reporters and editors. I was working nights. I was working 4 p.m. to midnight for 3 to 4 years, and eventually I made the shift into opinion editing, where I got to work some regular hours in the daytime, which was wonderful. And while I was an opinion editor, I got to write about dating and relationships a little bit on the side, which was really fun.
Mm.
It's sort of, I remember one of the fun things about being an opinion editor in this Sunday opinion section was that in one week I could work with a former budget director from the government who was writing a story about the federal budget. I could work with an arts and entertainment reporter who was writing about why people were punching each other in the face on TV. And then I could also work on a dating story on the side. So it was just this real holistic mix of topics, which
Mm.
really got me thinking outside of the box that I was in, right? Sometimes I think business reporters or sports reporters can kind of there's a temptation to just be focused on your immediate, but business, sports is also culture, is also media in a lot of ways. So the opinion editing experience got me thinking about those connections across disciplines. And I also worked with a lot of people who were not writers. So I was
Mm.
editing high school and college students, former members of the military, academics, people who had worked in government, and sort of helping them translate their story and their message for a mass audience. I was also
Mm.
teaching them about journalism. It is different to write an 800 or 1200 word opinion piece than it is to write a much longer scholarly essay or a scholarly paper that is peer reviewed. And so
Yeah.
it's very different. And so that was really fun for me, just to share my love of journalism with those beyond the discipline. And after 10 years of all of that, I decided it was my turn to write, and I pitched to the editors at the Washington Post that I wanted to start a section about dating and relationships and single life writ large beyond dating. And so I did that for about 7 years, and it took many forms. At the beginning, it started as a podcast
Mm,
because this was the beginning of the second wave of podcasting coming back, right? This was like 2015.
yeah.
And I had this proposal for I want to have this section about dating and relationships and single life. But in a large institution, it can take time to get the go
Mm,
ahead to do such things. And in the meantime, I had been talking to a video producer at the Washington Post, and she said, "Why don't we start working on your podcast right away? We can start working on this before the bosses have decided about the section." And so we did that. That was super fun. And then all of a sudden, so the dating vertical, which we later called Soloish, was green lighted. And then I had a blog and a podcast.
amazing.
And it was, yes, it was amazing. It was a lot of work all at once. And grabbing different people's bits of time, an editor here was paired with me, and also had was working on this video project, or the podcast. And that was really fun because for the first time I was learning how to translate my
Mm,
stories and ideas into audio, and then
mm,
also thinking from the get-go, is this a story that's best told in audio, or is this a text-based story? Don't always
mm,
get those
mm,
answers right, but it was a learning process, and I did learn a lot about audio. I would love to get back to it someday, perhaps in this next chapter. And uh so that section for that, at the beginning it was a mix of me editing other people's stories because I felt very strongly that I wanted to involve more than just my perspective or experience. And I was also writing myself. And so this was back in the days where personal essays would very easily explode on the internet, sort of before the first Trump administration. You could have an
mhm,
essay about, I remember one that I published was about a woman and her husband who felt like they had no friends, and how difficult it can be to make friends as an adult. And that, exploded one
mm,
day. And the next, it might be an essay about a woman who went on a first date with a man who was somewhat famous and what happened there. And, that also exploded in different ways. And so I loved it because it got me out of my own head and own experience, and
mm,
hopefully did the same for readers. And it really created this place on the internet where people could tell stories about what it was like to be dating, looking for love and companionship, and all the different forms that that can take, and the struggles. And we had the tagline, "Unmarried but far from alone." And
mm,
that was my intention, to make contribute to help contributors and readers feel like less alone. And
yeah.
I think that uh, intention has followed through a lot of my journalism. Then when I went on to become a tech reporter a few years ago, I have always made it a point when I'm talking to sources for news stories, if they've been through something that they experienced as terrible or isolating in some way, I often let them know, you are not the only one who's had this experience. I have talked
Mm,
to X, Y, and Z people who are also going to be in the story right there with you, and they have also been through something like what you're talking about. So I think yeah, sometimes we, as reporters don't always think about everything that's going through a source's head when they're deciding whether or not to talk to a reporter and trust a reporter.
mm,
And some of what we can bring to that experience is to let them know, based on our reporting, that there are
yeah.
others
You
as well.
create real community. You have the power to create real community. Yeah. Lisa, so talk to us about what's next. So you've been laid off in this latest purge where a lot of people lost their jobs at the Washington Post. There was an enormous amount of backlash against all of that, an outcry around the world about what media is and what printed media is going to be and what the future of printed media looks like and what it means to be owned by a billionaire. And, the stories are never ending and all really important because the role the media plays in the world is super important. And we get increasingly to a space where people own media and then have influence that they shouldn't necessarily have over an enormous amount of people.
Yeah, it's a big question. And one that I think we're all watching to see what will happen.
Mm,
Uh, Owners' priorities can change. I
mm,
don't exactly know what Jeff Bezos, how his, if things have changed for him, in the years that he's owned the Washington Post, but it's hard to find a media organization that is not owned by a billionaire
yeah,
these days. Most of
yeah,
them are.
yeah,
And the the business model is facing a lot of issues and problems that money alone can't necessarily fix.
yeah.
So, uh, what's next for me? I'm still figuring that out. I've just like I mentioned that there's at every step there have been people offering me opportunities and offering to help. Um, Editors from my past have reached out to connect me with potential opportunities. I'm working through some of those. I am talking to editors at different publications. I have also, I've taken on a few freelance assignments and just today in trying to decide about another freelance assignment that has come into my lap through my journalism, I realize it's the first time that I'm the one making the decisions about what my priorities are, and
Mm,
that's a huge responsibility, and I'm still figuring it out. I had a friend tell me this week that that this whole process is going to probably lead me to trust my instincts a little bit more and lean on
mm,
them. Because in a
mm,
newsroom, one of the things that's wonderful is that you have all these different voices and people with different knowledge. And what I loved about that was getting to say, I have this idea that might be something. Can we talk about what you think it might be and where it might
mm,
fit? And sometimes that's not even an idea for me. It's a question or a jumping off point for a colleague. And I love doing that because also people will bring things to me, right? It's a very academic interchange sometimes.
yeah.
It can feel like an extension of university.
Mm,
And I've been really missing that. Finding it in other places, still talking to my colleagues about story ideas it's a collection of editors now rather than one dedicated person.
yeah.
But yeah, there's no one to say, this is your focus today, Lisa. Like I'm the one who has to say that, and I'm still getting used to that.
Yeah, I can imagine. We were talking about that these times of change are often challenging because the unknown is a challenge.
Yes, and I said, sorry, yes. And, I think often about how my career to the outside might look linear. Lisa Bonos has been a
Mm,
reporter and editor at the Washington Post for 20 years. But most of the time I was living that, it did not feel linear to me,
mm,
right? I started as a copy editor. That was really fun and interesting, but I wanted to move into reporting. I didn't see a path exactly because I was a copy editor. It's hard to get off the copy desk onto a reporting position, and most of those that were available didn't seem suited to my skills or interests.
mm,
So I moved into opinion editing because I there were certain editors I wanted to work with who were known for mentoring young people, and I liked the way they approached the work in a thoughtful, curious way, and I thought I could learn from them, and I would enjoy the experience of working with them. And then I still wanted to write full time, and I didn't know how to get there until I had a nudge and a push to pitch something that was truly my own. And then after doing that for a while, when I moved to San Francisco, I didn't know how to break into tech reporting. And a different editor at the Post, based off my reputation of being a good hard worker, said, "Why don't you become a tech editor here with us and learn about the industry from, again, really smart, established editors who would help teach me what I needed to learn. And then after doing that for a bit, I said, no, I want to go back to reporting. And I was able to, and I'm very grateful for that. So I guess, it's very hard to see the big picture story of your life when you're
Mm-hmm.
in it day to
Mm-hmm.
day. Um, but there was a moment when when I was able to start this section about dating and relationships where I realized that I looked back and I realized, oh my gosh, my career has come full circle because in college I had a dating and relationships column. And I never necessarily thought I was going to return to that. But 10 years later, I realized, wow, everything that I have learned, right? Like editing, helping others shape their voices, listening to, finding opinions that might be different from mine and from the mainstream and bringing those, figuring out how to present them to a wide audience, like and having written myself, like all of it came together. I got to harness all of my skills all at once, and that was so thrilling. But if you had told me 10 years earlier, this is what you're going to do in 10 years, I probably wouldn't have believed you.
I can imagine. Lisa, talk to us a little bit about these lessons you've learned in reporting about different interests, right? If we think about the tech reporting you've been doing over the last couple of years, obviously, that's in everyone's daily thoughts, technology, the future of technology, what technology is doing to us. What do you feel you've learned from reporting on it for a number of years?
One thing that I think about a lot is that um, our assumptions about how people use technology and the things they do and don't like about it are often wrong.
Mm,
I wrote this story about people who are not using AI, and I
hmm.
think
I remember
one
that.
one
Yeah.
yeah, one character that really stood out for me was this high school student who said she got the option. You can use a chatbot to help you with this, or an image generator to help you with this assignment, or you can do it on your own. And she was
Mm,
one of a handful of students in this high school class. I said, no, I want to do it on my own. And she literally said to me, it's part of growing up to learn how to do your own work,
yeah.
right? Like we think of young people as all early adopters of the new technology, and a lot of
Mm,
times they are, but sometimes they're the most critical, like this young woman was, and she's not the only one,
yeah.
she was also
Yeah.
reticent to speak on the record, and I, told her I've spoken to other high school students who feel the same way. So that's one thing, and then the other is just how the fast pace of new technology being rolled out is really changing our daily lives so quickly. We see it in the workplace, we see it in the way people relate to one another. Uh, it's almost happening faster than the media can keep up with.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Then the media keep up with, and definitely all of our policies and politics and government structures around it are far too slow with the advancement of technology. What would you say matters most to you now, Lisa, and how would you like to matter? You were part of a big name, a big construct, incredible teams. What do you feel matters more to you now that this is a new phase where you're having to, but also have the opportunity to, have a complete reset?
Yeah, it's a it's a big question. I'm working on answering every day. I have the privilege of and both the responsibility of representing the Washington Post. I pick up the phone and for 20 years I said, this is Lisa Bonos from the Washington Post. And
Mm,
now I'm saying, this is Lisa Bonos, a tech journalist in San Francisco. It doesn't feel as weird as I thought it would feel to introduce myself differently. I am looking for stories that I want to tell.
yeah.
And I'm working on further developing my own voice and lens through which I want to tell stories about technology and the way we live today. So that I think will mean turning down some assignments that are surprising me that I'm saying no to
Mm,
because it might not align with telling stories that I want to focus on. Um, and after 20 years of an editor saying this is important now, focus on this, but not that, I have to be that voice, and yeah, it's hard. I have all, I mean, I've worked as an editor and I've worked alongside a lot of brilliant editors, and now I have even more respect for what they do and having to set the agenda for each day, week, month, year.
mm,
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
definitely.
Okay.
Lisa, so you talked about this. What do you feel are those sort of values or themes that are important for you now? What you stand for?
Yeah. I am still interested and focused on telling stories about how technology affects people's daily lives more from the human aspect
Hmm.
than the corporate.
Hmm.
I'm, yeah, I'm sort of a reader of mine made this very astute realization once. He said, "You write stories about how technology intersects with what it means to be human." And I was like, yes, exactly.
Mm,
And so I'm looking for those stories more, and trying to make sure there's a human angle in everything that I'm working on and writing about. And yeah, I just also really enjoy the experience of reporting. And so I want to continue to like go out, see things, talk to people, be surprised by what they say, synthesize it all, and bring it back to an audience that hopefully I will
mm,
grow on my own on different platforms and just get to stretch and write for different outlets.
yeah. Lisa, so what do you feel are your sort of human takeaways? You've been researching and reporting on human themes, as in, dating and relationships and tech and culture. And what takeaways do you have about us humans or humanity
Hmm.
as a whole, do you feel?
I think there is so much coming at us, both in content that we can consume and demands of daily life from bosses,
Mm,
family, friends, partners, uh, that that we have to think a lot more critically about the decisions that we make about how we want to spend our time, what we want to intake, every time people are trying to put their phones down and do detoxes, we realize how much we are tied to these devices and everything that they provide. But I mean, I'm not immune from that. I'm also trying to put down my phone more. And then also it brings you to more people, and that's a wonderful thing as well. But I think like learning how to balance those and just really thinking about where we want to invest our time, focus, energy, and effort
mm. To
in
be
a,
be fully
in a critical
aligned
way.
with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, to
yeah.
align with that. What do you feel is your main motivator?
Hmm. That's such a good question. My main motivator is that I've been a journalist because I like to write, but also because I like to connect with people,
Hmm.
and that's through the reporting process, hearing people's stories, connecting them to what's going on in the world, but then also readers
Hmm.
have feedback and insight that I never thought about. They also know people and have story ideas as well. And so it's that connection through the work. And then I also feel um, I like to share, my work immediately. I like that immediacy of journalism where you get feedback instantly,
Hmm.
and you can see what stories resonate and which don't, which is sometimes surprising, as you know.
Yeah. Lisa, so what advice would you give to young people listening who are writers? They've got the bug, they love researching and reporting, they want to get into that form of media. What would you tell them? What are the biggest lessons you've learned that you might be able to pass on?
Yeah. Well, one would be to focus on the stories that you're interested in,
Hmm.
right? Like I think when I got into dating and relationship reporting, I spent years thinking like this is not serious. No one's going to take me seriously if I do this as a job. I want to be a serious journalist. Going into I was on the business desk, I was opinion editing, and I learned a lot on those desks, and it was very interesting. But I also was still and had this other interest that I wanted to write about. And I actually had a mentor say to me, are you kidding? Relationships are the most serious thing in a person's life. It's where we spend the most time, effort, and really invest ourselves in our happiness. And so it kind of took someone where this wasn't their focus to say, no, this is important and you should do this.
Hmm.
And then when I moved to San Francisco, I wanted to be more engaged with the outside world that I was immediately living in, like these tech companies. I didn't understand them. I wanted to learn more. So many people here work in tech or are somehow connected to it. And so I just wanted to learn more about that. And it's been fascinating. I think so. Yeah, the advice is twofold. One is to go toward the stories that you're interested in and the ones that you feel that you have something unique and special to add. And then
Hmm.
also, I throughout my career have had this guiding light of going toward like working with the people that I thought I could learn from.
Hmm.
Mm, and sometimes the dream job might not might look different than you think, but I always went toward working with people that I thought I could learn from.
That
And
inspired you. Yeah.
yes,
And also, if I listen to you, that you can pivot, right? You don't have to only report on one thing for the rest of your life. That could be a phase where you do that and you've done it for 7 years, and then you moved to San Francisco and you pivoted and you reported on something else that really you had no idea about to begin
right.
with.
Yes, I think young people actually have a lot to teach other generations about that ability to
Yeah.
pivot, dive in, do
Mm.
something new. Uh yeah, because I could use some help with that these days.
Lisa, what do you feel is the future of reporting and print media?
Uh I think that the future is not tied to print as much. I think it's media writ large
Mm.
and learning how to be a storyteller in all mediums.
Mm. Mm.
It's someone who can communicate their stories, ideas, and reporting in audio, video, and text.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to be expected to do more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lisa, how can we support you?
Oh, thank you for asking that. uh, Send story ideas my way, or connections for editors or jobs. That would always be appreciated. Um,
Tell us how people can get in touch with you.
I'm on Instagram at Lisa Bonos, LisaBonos. I'm also on X and Blue Sky with those same names. And yeah.
What takeaways would you like our listeners to have from your story, Lisa?
Hmm. I feel like I'm trying to figure that out for myself. Um, I think sometimes people are surprised and impressed that I stayed at an institution for 20 years.
Mm.
That was something that's common in maybe my parents' generation, but not so much for a millennial. Uh, And I'm very proud and glad that I got to spend 20 years at the Washington Post. I am also like feel a a look at others who have jumped around a lot, and I'm jealous of that experience. I'm like, wow, they learned how to get their feet under them quickly in all these different environments. So in some ways, I feel like I'm looking for my second job.
Mm,
Uh, 20 years later than I would normally be looking for my second job. That's not to say, I don't mean to undercut all of the pivoting and the hard work that it is within a large institution to find that next step because that was not
yeah.
easy either. Um, but uh just yeah, that everything that you learn by moving around, I think is valuable. And now I'm learning to do that myself and to trust myself about what the right next step is. I think so that's something that I'm learning. But okay, you asked me what if like I could answer that better potentially.
No, I think you did a
Um,
good job because you are in a position where you're a little in limbo. It doesn't mean you're not doing what you're doing, but
yeah,
it means that you're not 100% sure where you're going and what the
yeah,
next things will be, which I think is always really interesting to hear, Lisa, because I think that many young people feel this is all quite linear, and they always feel that they're maybe not hacking it because
Mhm.
they're, and so I think this is just not most people's experience. Most
Yeah,
people's experience is not the linear experience. So I love talking to people who are a little bit in a limbo state where they don't know exactly what comes. And that is also a normal state of being, even as a
yes,
grown up, right? Where you
yes,
have worked for a reputable organization for 2 decades. That's a very long time. But to see the pivots and the hard work and the figuring out the next step and maybe moving and figuring out, and is there a chance for me in this organization, or am I changing, or am I, and then sometimes you get laid off, and that is also a
right,
fact of life. And
right,
so what do we do with this? We can be down in the dumps about it for 24 hours, but then we need to create a new reality. And so you get
right,
back up and you go back out there and you think what's important for me, and you have a chance to reevaluate and to really double down on your values and what you actually want to report on, or that, or in any job. Actually, this is absolutely a reality for many people. And if we are to believe the tech bros, this is going to happen to a lot of people in the next 5 years. And so I want to
sure,
show the stories where you don't know exactly, where you've been. You
yeah,
have all your learnings. You got this incredible rucksack full of experiences and lessons learned and all of the things that will bring you to the next thing because you have experience. And that counts for a lot.
yeah. No, thank you for saying that. I think yeah, now I know what I want to say.
You go.
Um, okay. I think what people can take away from my story is that it's okay to be exactly where you are
Hmm.
and to not have the answers just yet. I have watched as so many of my colleagues have gotten laid off and they've dived into job searching a little faster than I have. They have, some of them have signed on for new jobs
Hmm.
immediately. And I have not felt ready to do that. I feel after 20 years at one place, I want to take a breath a little
Yeah.
bit more before
Yeah.
I make another commitment to a new institution. And maybe that commitment is to myself and to do this independently as long as I can. But I it's been hard not to judge myself
Hmm.
for taking a moment and a breath, especially as journalists. We're taught to act immediately. There's a story breaks,
Yeah.
you're on it immediately, and I think it has been restorative and much needed to take a bit of a pause. I mean, that said, I'm still doing job interviews and um, taking on assignments, but I'm not pressuring myself to rush
Yeah.
into a new thing just yet. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Lisa, thank you. Good for you. Thank you for your time and your insights and your story to support others on their journey.
Thank you for having me.